So, Cenk, the spirit of inviting you is that there's some confusion of these divides of right versus left, populist versus corporatist. I guess a good opening would be, as a man in the progressive movement, as one of the leaders of the progressive movement, what do you make of this last year, the state of the Democrat Party, and kind of American politics from the more progressive left perspective?
Yeah. So, first of all, I'm proud to represent the left flank of the populist movement, and I think we need both flanks, so I'm happy to have this conversation. In terms of what has gone wrong in the Democratic Party, it's the same thing that went wrong in the Republican Party, but I do have to give you guys credit for a revolution well done. And what I mean by that is not a revolution against the Democratic Party or the left or the country, but a revolution against the establishment. I knew you guys were for real in fighting against the establishment when I started going on right-wing shows and I would say something negative about Mitch McConnell. And when I did that in the past, what I would get back is, oh, no, Mitch McConnell's great. Pelosi's terrible, but Mitch McConnell's great. My left-wing friends out there, we have been waiting for the right-wing populists to boo Mitch McConnell and Dick Cheney our whole lives. Take the win.
Man, and
take the win.
That's an interesting point, too, because I remember when I was quite a bit younger, towards the end of Bush's administration, a lot of that left-wing rhetoric, especially among progressives, I remember actually watching the Young Turks when I was younger, was, Dick Cheney and the Republican war hawks, we need to get away from that sort of military-industrial complex. It wasn't called that as frequently back then, but that's what they were describing with the progressive left back in the day. And nowadays, you're seeing that the Republicans are fighting against that sort of structure more than the Democrats are. And so it's interesting to kind of see how the parties have slightly shifted on some of these issues.
Now, what we need to do in the Democratic Party is we need to do likewise. We need to have a revolt against the Joe Bidens, the Kamala Harrises, and the Nancy Pelosi's, and the Hillary Clintons, and now all of a sudden the Dick Cheneys. What are they doing on our side? Are you guys nuts?
I have to interject. When all of a sudden Kamala Harris is doing the Liz Cheney thing, I said, does she want to lose?
Facts.
I mean,
what's amazing is I said the same thing.
Yo,
look,
me too.
Dick Cheney polls at 13%. What lunatic thought it was a good idea to wrap yourself around Dick Cheney? I mean, when we started the Young Turks 22 years ago, longest running show in internet history, first ever YouTube partner with original YouTubers, one of the driving forces was get Dick Cheney out of office, right? And now for Kamala Harris to come full circle and say, oh, I've got 90 corporate CEOs backing me, and I've got all these executives on my side, and I've got Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney on my side, was so counterproductive. It's not what the left wing stands for. It's not what the Democratic Party should be about.
See, that's where I think he's wrong. That is what the left stands for today in America. The vast majority of these guys are not trying to avoid war. A lot of the leftist politicians that are in prominent positions in the federal government. So maybe at the grassroots, you've got a lot of progressives that are like, we don't want war. But you got to look at your politicians. Man, since Biden came in, there's been a lot of global conflict, and we haven't found a way to stop it.
So the problem is the establishment. They are controlled by the donor class, and mainstream media is their marketing arm. They do not do news. They do propaganda. And one more thing. What I want you guys to recognize is that mainstream media you think is against you. You think they're against the right wing. But they also hate Bernie Sanders. And they also hate me. And they also hate the populists on the left. What mainstream media really loves is the establishment and the elites. They're against all of us combined. And if we dare unite on issues we agree on, they will be livid, and it'll be a beautiful day in America.
Explain to us, why is it that right-wing revolution was successful, and the Bernie Sanders with 2 attempts actually won the primary in 2016, and he had it stolen. Again, stolen election talk can be a little controversial. They stole it from Bernie Sanders in 2016. Why was that revolution not successful?
Yeah, I think it was because Donald Trump was a celebrity, and they didn't take him seriously, so they made the mistake of giving him mainstream media coverage. And so they thought, and if you remember, Bill Clinton had this brilliant idea, we'll encourage Donald Trump to run on the Republican side, and it'll destroy the Republican Party. How'd that work out for you, Bill? And so I remember saying at the time, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Because what I sensed was, you need a non-politician to lead the revolt.
Yeah.
So, because all the politicians, and right now they're having a conversation on the Democratic side about 2028, and the only people they mention are politicians. And my answer to that is hell no. Okay? Because the politicians are used to the corruption. They grew up in the corruption. They like the corruption. They got their power through the corruption. So I don't want that. I don't need that. So back in 2016, actually 2015, after I think it was the second debate, when Trump was on stage and he said, I gave all these guys money and they did exactly what I wanted. At that point, everyone on earth, certainly in the establishment and mainstream media, says he has no chance of winning, none. I went on the Young Turks and I said, he's going to win the Republican primary, okay? Because people hate corruption, and they know it in their bones, okay? We will disagree on, is Trump really not corrupt? Is Trump really going to do the things that he promised? Is he really a populist? I would love to prove me wrong.
I don't think Trump is perfect, but he's most definitely, in my mind, the least corrupt option that we have currently.
And remember, guys, you also have donors. Beware of the donors. Don't forget that, and don't let your guard down, okay? But so on the Democratic side,
advice,
we have got to elect a populist. If we don't, we're going to make the same mistake we made when they anointed Hillary Clinton, when they anointed Joe Biden, and when they anointed Kamala Harris. So my Democratic friends, how many times are you going to lose before you realize that mainstream media and the establishment are lying to you?
Is that energy forefront in the Democrat Party right now? And I'm not saying this facetiously. Read us into what the power brokers of the Democrat Party are saying. Are they saying,
we know what they're saying, man. They're just trying to find a new way to finesse their way into power.
We're hearing some of the names, but what is the vibe of the people that do this for a living?
Yeah, so I can tell you definitively that the Democratic leadership and the Democratic establishment will never voluntarily go in a new direction. They will never voluntarily accept populism. They are built on donor money. They are of the donors, by the donors, for the donors. So what I need left-wing voters to understand is that they're never going to give you what you want incrementally. Martin Luther King talked about the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Oh, if we just go a little further with Joe Biden, he'll give us another crumble and another tiny increment. No, they're going to just pick a new and improved corporate robot like Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom, and they're going to come out with a new script, and they're going to say, I am now a populist, and they will wear flannel shirts, and then they'll sneak out and go to French Laundry, right? So don't believe the corporate robots. Remember how many times they lied to you. We need to do a populist revolt and pick a populist left-winger so we could have a real contest in this country. The establishment Democrats are never going to win.
I totally agree with Cenk here, and it's interesting because there's actually stats on this past election, Kamala versus Trump, how much money they got from big donors, from big business, and what those amounts were, comparing them. And man, Kamala got so much more funding from big business than Trump did. So, the right, I agree with Cenk, has to be cautious about not letting donors continue to have too much of a place in the Republican Party, right? Like, we should try to get money out of politics on the right, but the left has an even bigger battle to fight with that. And I think Cenk is on the money. It's going to take not electing these people and immediately going against the candidates that the donors are giving money to, and doing that for years before the Democratic Party is going to have a turnaround like the Republican Party has.
We need to go populist, and the way to do that is not by negotiating with them, it's by defeating them in a primary. So the populist wing is already there. That base that was there in 2016 and 2020 still exists. And remember, guys, Bernie won the first 3 states in 2020. He was this close to winning until Obama and Clyburn called in all the candidates.
He's right.
And said, you all have to bow to Joe Biden. And then mainstream media then said, Joe Biden is the greatest. And they started talking about how Bernie Sanders, the most successful Jewish candidate in American history.
Bro, I love Cenk's voice when he gets fired up.
Followers who wore brown shirts and fascists and Nazis. Where have you heard that before? So whenever it's an outsider, all of a sudden mainstream media says fascist, even if it's a Jewish candidate, right? So they use the same tricks. And you guys have been canceled. I've been canceled. They do the same thing to both of us over and over again. So the left-wing populists are ready, but we do need more votes from people who used to be in the establishment Democratic camp. And why were they in that camp? Because they love corruption, they love war, they love change? No, guys. They were in that camp because mainstream media lied to them. And mainstream media told them, oh, Bernie can't win. Bernie was up by 12 points on Election Day in 2016. They said, he's radical. And they called you guys radical and said you couldn't win. They call us radical and say we can't win. But they're wrong. They're lying. So what I need Democrats to understand is stop believing in Morning Joe and The View and all the garbage on TV.
Yo, that's so real. A lot of the people that watch these shows that I know in my personal life are sort of like grandparents or older parents, like 45 plus. And it's funny because I've seen a number of them get really radicalized watching these shows like, Morning Joe or CNN or whatever, where they come out with these really strong opinions and they're just so ready to pick fights over nothing. It really is like indoctrination almost, some of these shows. And I'm sure it's the same with some of the internet shows, but I think at least with the internet, there's such a diversity of content that you can consume and they're saying different things, whereas with cable news, it's all one narrative oftentimes.
TYT is a giant network, but we have a lot of great progressive and populist shows that are not part of TYT, that's in the left-wing ecosystem. So I don't think that that's the issue. I don't think that there isn't enough shows. I think that there's a couple others. One, on the right, you guys do a great job of coalescing, okay? So you do a couple of things well. You work together well, and you're more welcoming, if I'm being honest. If you agree with MAGA 5%, the answer you get is welcome, right? Come join us, right? On the left, if you disagree 5%, they go, get out of here, you're a right-winger, you're a fascist.
Bro, what Cenk is saying there is so accurate. Like, there's people in my personal life where, politics might come up and I'll try to dance around it, but there's that 5% that they figure out, some of his beliefs are conservative. And they get heated, they get triggered, and they want nothing to do with me anymore as soon as they find that 5% of disagreements, right? But then on the right, it's like, you've got people that can have completely different beliefs, but a lot of times they're willing to compromise and at least come together on what they do agree on. The right does have a better big tent than the left does. They're willing to really compromise to get things done. The left is beyond that. And it's so funny because a lot of times the people that you hear saying, we need to get back to when politicians would work together, when there was a middle ground, a lot of times you hear that from people on the left. I'm talking the constituency level. But then I look at it and I'm like, but you guys are also the ones that are so quick to judge anybody that slightly differs in opinion from you.
You guys welcome enough people in, eventually you win the popular vote. That's what I warned them about, and that's what happened, right? So, look, I propose simple rules, the 3 rules of the internet. Rule number 1, when we disagree, we fight. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Now, rule number 2 is, afterwards, we must have a beer together, okay?
Can I do a cigar?
And rule number 3 is, for God's sake, when we agree, let's unite. So
I can rock with that. Yeah.
For the left, we have too much division. We almost never unify. I don't mean with the right. I mean internally. The left loves to attack one another. I love you guys on the left. I love you. But every once in a while, when we get a yes, when we agree, can we please unite? And the second thing we need is for the old, I'm being honest, and on average, not everyone, of course, but for the older Democratic voters, please turn off your television sets.
There it is.
They're lying to you. They're tricking you. They're trying to get you to vote for corruption. They're trying to get you to vote for policies you don't even want.
The traditional media, television media, specifically left-leaning, has gotten nuts. I was watching recently a clip from The View where Whoopi Goldberg is mocking RFK for saying that instead of investing money into weight loss medicine, we need to talk to our kids about getting more exercise and eating healthier. And she's mocking this. And it's not lost on me that most of conventional television's funding comes from big pharma. It's interesting there.
Everybody's positions are in a different part of the left-right spectrum and on different policies. So I can name you policies where you say, that's pretty moderate, right? I can name you policies that, you're not sure is left or right-wing, but that is definitely populist, right? But some of my policies might be called extreme left in America. So, for example, I'm massively in favor of gun control.
Yeah, I'm with the crowd on this one. Y'all are never taking my guns. I don't care if I got to get in a boating accident.
So my point to my left-wing allies is, if you really believe in the most, far left positions, as I do on gun control, for example, that's okay. But you've got to know what to emphasize and what not to emphasize.
So I obviously disagree with Cenk about gun control. If you look at the stats, the amount of gun deaths in the United States, specifically homicides, murder by gun, is under 100,000 per year. And there's an FBI statistic from 2015 that projects that gun ownership in America actually prevents as many as 250,000 deaths per year. So there's actually a positive ratio to the amount of lives saved by guns, according to the FBI, which in 2015, the FBI was not a super pro-conservative organization. Still not today. But I agree with Cenk on the principle of focusing on what the people actually care about during elections. And that's something that watching Kamala's campaign I was so confused about, is like, people are really truly financially struggling, and she was really nowhere to be seen when it came to economic ideas, ways to help middle class families. She would do a tiny bit of lip service here and there, but that almost wasn't a main issue for her campaign. And it's kind of like, how do you expect to win the popular vote of the country when you're not speaking to the most popular issue in the country right now?
So you got to know what to convince the American people of and what to hold your ground on. And the number one thing to hold your ground on is constitutional rights.
Like the Second Amendment.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. Thank you.
No, I know. So guys, look at that. We totally disagree on that issue, but we just...
You were asking for that one, I'm sorry.
No problem. No, but look, that was an important moment, because we totally disagree on that issue, but we just shook hands anyway. And you know what we'll do afterwards? We'll have a beer!
I might have to grab a cigar on this one, Shane. I don't drink.
You know what it is when you disagree on something and then you fight about it and then you have a beer afterwards? That's called America. So let me see if I can...
Man, he's on the money with that, dude. That is America, because I feel like the left is good at disagreeing. They're good at that first part of fighting for what they believe in, but they're garbage at the other side of coming together afterwards and saying, but look, I disagree with you on these economic policies, on these social policies, but we're all part of the same family. Let's love each other. Let's feed each other. Let's have a good time. They're bad at that second part. And I think, the right has work to do too. Let me not just sound like I'm dunking on Democrats. We've got a ways to go on the right. But man, that's what we need in America if we're going to heal this division is, look, it's okay to have different beliefs, but you don't got to hate someone because you believe something else. You know what I mean?
So guys, when we can even disagree about what's constitutional, Second Amendment, housing, etc. But just let's treat everyone as Americans. And I say that to the right and I say it to the left.
For sure. So we're going to go a little overtime because I know the boss here. And there's two things. I want to ask about free speech, and then I want to try to say, can we get one or two action items that this community can get behind in this new Congress and this presidency that are populist that maybe we can push for and advocate for? Now, I want to try to maybe see if we could brainstorm that together. Number one, first on free speech. Do you think that the left, and you are an exception, is ready to embrace a robust, spirited culture of freedom of speech where disagreement is welcome, where you're able to have these kind of dialogues and forums? And
well,
I think it's a tragedy.
One,
it seems to be that more the right is willing to do it. Prove me wrong if that really is the case.
Yeah, I'm trying to remind the left of who we are, because the left is supposed to be for freedom of speech. The left
but they're
needs
not.
freedom. If you're gay or you're trans or you're Muslim or you're someone that was otherized at some point in your life, you need freedom more than anyone else does. You need equality more than anyone else does. You need justice more than anyone else does. So
I just got to jump in. I think that's kind of one of the differences between the idea of equality and equity, where the left really emphasizes equity and the right emphasizes equality. The left would say, like Cenk is saying right here, if you've been deprived of something, now you need extra to make up for that, whereas the right would say, no, we just all need to be at an equal footing. What I will say is I understand the left's argument that if you're deprived of something, you need a leg up. Like on equality, let's say you've been deprived of rights or whatever, right? You need a leg up. I would argue more the equality side. You don't want to give somebody extra protections or extra rights over another group, because then you start to, over time, create imbalances that create more hatred towards that same group that you're trying to protect. It's kind of like, if we want everybody to be treated as equally as possible, then we need to put them on equal ground. If you start picking winners and losers, that just creates more of that disparity that drives people to dislike other groups. That's just my thoughts on that.
I want you guys to not assume that we hate you or that we're evil or that we're bad. But if we're going to do that, the left wing has to do the same. They have to assume that you're not evil, that you don't hate them, and you're not.
I love that Cenk has got the guts to say this, because nobody else on the left is really coming out and calling out the left to say, yo, we got to reach across the aisle. And let me just remind folks on the left that might be watching this. Trump won the popular vote, not just the Electoral College, which he did in a landslide, but also the popular vote. So you can't sit there and just continue to play hardball and say, we're not going to work with you. They control everything. You got your butts handed to you guys because the American people didn't like what you were currently standing for. And if you're going to stand on that hill, then you're going to die on it.
When we disagree, let's try two more real quick here. When we disagree, can we agree to not hate each other? When we have these fights, to Charlie's point, can we, for the first time in my life...
I love that he's saying it, though, because hopefully some folks on the left that need to hear this will hear this.
Begin to actually listen to one another. And Charlie, I'll give you credit on this, because one of the turning points, if you will, in how I started to view the right wing is when you came on the Young Turks at the RNC, and, we started talking about banning private equity from buying residential real estate.
Which I totally agree with. That the young people in this audience should not have to compete against BlackRock to be able to own a home. Do you guys agree?
This is where the populist left and the populist right need to come together. I'm Gen Z, bro. I just want to buy a house. I just want to start a little garden in the backyard and grow some herbs, some mint, but y'all make that impossible. Big business coming in and buying residential real estate. And they can outbid any family, companies like BlackRock. It's actually insane. And Patrick Bet-David talked about the housing crisis in America. Another part of it is inventory. We are 8.5 million households short of where we should be for how much the American population has grown since the 1970s and 80s. We should have 8.5 million more homes if we're going to keep up with the housing from back then. So you look at that, why aren't we incentivizing private equity to come in and create more homes rather than just buy up the existing ones?
And all my life, I go on Republican shows, I go on right-wing shows. When I say something against the bankers, they're like, no, the bankers are great, the bankers are great. Oh, I was so frustrated. And now, all of a sudden, we got the right-wing populists saying, let's ban the bankers from buying our homes so they don't drive up the prices. Yes!
I agree with Cenk here, man. That's a positive change we made on the right.
Take yes for an answer.
Bro, especially when you learn about fiat currency and the way that the banking system works, these guys have a business model where they can essentially create money out of thin air, right? They're getting it from the government and loaning it to us with interest. They have a very small reserve requirement, meaning they're not actually holding on to your money like they say they are. They're holding on to a very small percentage of your money and going and gambling with the rest. Now, what happens if that gamble goes bad, like you saw in 2008? The taxpayers have to pay for their bad gambles. It's the most bullcrap business model in the world today.
We're no longer in an establishment prison. Now we're in the populist woods. And if you say, yeah, but we're going to fight in the populist woods, yes. But at least we're all human out here. We defeated the corporate robots. And we've got more
for now, man.
fights
For now, that's the thing is, Trump's only here for 4 years. They're going to have 4 years of all these corporatists putting money behind new candidates, figuring out their new strategies, building new media conglomerates, buying out these existing podcasts that seem free today. Like, they're not going to stop. 4 years from now is going to be another war.
When I see you guys, I don't hate you anymore, right? I see my fellow Americans. And so in these populist woods, we'll sometimes have skirmishes, sometimes we'll have battles. But the main thing I'm trying to drive with the 6 points of the populist plank, higher wages for Americans, time off for moms after they have a baby, anti-corruption,
totally
anti-war.
Me too.
Audit the Pentagon.
Oh, yes. So the reason I picked those is not because they're the most left-wing positions, because those are the positions we all agree on.
That's right.
And God help the establishment if we actually work together to do those things.
One thing that's really interesting about seeing Cenk and Charlie Kirk come together this is not their first time actually meeting each other at one of these big conferences. Check out this clip of how these guys interacted with each other 6 years ago.
Okay, you're trying to attack me, which is ridiculous, like asking me what my salary is. Sure, I'll reveal it willingly.
You brought it up in context. I'm asking, why don't you live like a socialist?
Okay.
Go live like a socialist.
The point is larger. The point is larger than that, Charlie.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk. I live as a
Hey,
capitalist,
hey,
okay? I live when I believe.
No.
What do
Bro,
I
what's
do?
he even
I
heated
every
about?
single year.
Hold on.
What's my salary?
Charlie.
Less than his.
Charlie, take a
Come on,
seat.
Cenk, let's go.
Charlie,
What
take
are you doing? Sit
Oh,
Take a
Cenk's
seat.
yelling in
Take
the
a
crowd.
seat.
All right.
All right, no. Take a seat. You're going to take a seat.
Oh my.
You're going to take a seat over
Oh
here.
my God.
What's my
They're
salary?
losing it.
All right.
Oh, ridiculous. All right, behave, everyone.
I practice what I preach, Cenk.
Charlie.
You
Stop.
do not practice what you preach.
Oh my gosh, these guys are gonna fight.
All right, hold on.
Man, it's crazy to see though how much these guys' relationship has changed over 6 years to where they're sitting on a stage together now and they're having a lot of agreeances and they're coming together. But for me, at least, that's hopeful. You know, if Cenk could come around, and I think Anna Kasparian as well is kind of coming around to this idea of let's make a populist wing of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party so that they can work together. Man, that could be a bright future. Let's see what the folks on the left are saying about this. Found this video.
They are obeying in advance. It is anticipatory obedience to Donald Trump. It's at the very least, it's going before these crowds of fascists, sharing a stage with absolute vile racist and white supremacist
Oh my God.
Charlie Kirk, glad-handing and shaking hands and acting like, oh, we can go have a beer, Nazi pal.
You know what's crazy, man, is the only one of my friends that actually went to America Fest this year is Arab. These people have this delusion that everybody they disagree with is truly a fascist.
And you're seeing, it's not just Cenk. I mean, it's a problem. He is a turncoat. Absolutely. What
He's so smug, dude. Why is everybody on the left so smug for no reason? So much ego. They just think they're right about everything. It's like, man, like no humility after your side got their ass whooped. The Republican won the popular vote for the first time in what, like 30, 40 years? But you're still so smug. I'm correct on everything. Bro, it's time to be humble.
I have to give you guys credit for a revolution well done.
No, you don't, Cenk. No, you don't, Cenk. No, you don't. You don't need to give them credit for a revolution well done.
Oh, this guy's unhinged.
All you're doing is making their job easier, their agenda easier to accomplish by giving them cover, by legitimizing them, by sitting before this crowd of conspiracy theorists and white supremacists. You're giving them cover and concealment from their crimes against humanity. And if you think it's too much, it's at the very least, crimes against democracy, crimes against normalcy.
Crimes against normalcy. Dude's just making shit up. That's crazy.
I don't break bread with racists. I don't have beers with racists.
It's just sad to see people that are so much hate in your heart, bro. Like, if somebody's racist, that's not cool. But you're not going to change their mind by ostracizing them and pushing them away from you and your ability to change their mind. And this is where the left really, as a conglomerate, I think gets it wrong. It's, I disagree with you, so get away from me. Inevitably, you're only going to push more and more people away, and your ability for thought is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller as you push away anyone with 5% differences like Cenk talked about.
Apparently, the people Cenk chooses to sup with, to cavort with, are just different than me. He has a different tolerance level for vile white supremacy and white Christian nationalism, which Charlie Kirk represents. I used to, decades ago, when I was a young Republican, I used to say things like what Cenk just said. Look, we could disagree. I don't get angry about politics. I just have a different opinion than you. And I came to kind of realize that was because I had no skin in the game. Cenk is a wildly wealthy man. The Donald Trump administration isn't going to come for him. In fact, he'll benefit from the Trump administration tax policies because he's a rich man. And when I was a young Republican, I was a white Marine. I carried with me privilege. So I could be a Republican. I'm not being oppressed. I'm not being told you're not fully equal. You're not fully American. You can't fully actualize and realize
I can't fully actualize shit with your stupid ass policies that you voted for.
Cenk Uygur made a decision to go and bolster the roster of guests at this Nazification of America festival. Choose to be there.
It's just sad to me that some people are so ready to double down on these very divisive takes. Everybody who is on that side of the aisle is a Nazi. Like, no. But, you know, I watch people like this after watching Cenk, and I'm just like, man, Cenk is slowly figuring it out. I wouldn't be surprised if Cenk continues to move further to the right over the next decade. Because Cenk is too rational, or so it seems, to fit in with this kind of left. Right? He seems more rational and approachable than somebody like this. He seems like somebody that you can actually talk to. And so I think Cenk is going to start to find that, oh, these Republicans, these populists on the right are actually more agreeable to me than a lot of these very small thinkers on the left. It's dope to see Cenk come together with Charlie Kirk, and it shows that there is change with some of the folks on the left. But I think what this shows, the fact that there's a small group of Democrats that are not going to budge like this guy, is that if we can continue on the right to skim off some of the rational people, some of the more populist folks like Cenk to the right, the Republican win's going to be even bigger in 2028 than it was in 2024. And Democrats are only going to be able to get people like this. Because this guy, people like this, are going to continue to push away people like Cenk that may agree with them on 90% of things, but have a 10% disagreement. So keep doing what you're doing, man. It's cool to see Cenk coming around. I love this idea of populism too. Like, yo, left, right on some of these social issues, who cares? Like, let's come together and attack some of these issues that we agree on. But thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Mitchell. God bless you guys. Have a good one.